to Tech Equipment live Q&A. At that point, I'll take a sip of my coffee.
Have a drink.
Which is keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
We are live. This is Dion Knowles from Tech Equipment. I'm live here with Dave Giddings and Jo Burrell. Jo is a clinical psychologist and Dave is the Tech Equipment ICT manager who's here to answer all your technical questions. So it is great to see everybody online today. Those who are joining us live can ask their questions in the comment box, in the chat box, in fact, and I will post those to our guests. So first of all, Jo, lovely to see you. Perhaps you could introduce yourself to give everybody a bit of a background of who you are, what you're all about, and why you're here to help us today.
Of course. So I'm Jo Burrell. I'm a clinical psychologist. I run a company called Ultimate Resilience along with another clinical psychologist, Felicity Baker. And we deliver training and coaching in building resilience and well-being, both to organisations and to individuals. And so I'm going to be talking today a little bit about the ways in which we might cope through the sort of challenges and difficulties that we're facing at the current time.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jo. Dave, are you there? Dave, those who don't know Dave is our resident
I'm
expert.
I'm here.
Dave, remind us, how long have you worked with Tech Equipment for now?
Since 2007. That's when I migrated from another part of the country. 2007. So, yeah, it's gone fast. It's gone quick.
Wow, right, okay, good. Well, we are live again, just reminding everybody this is your opportunity to post questions to, first of all, to Jo. Jo is a clinical psychologist, whether you're having various different problems coping or just annoyances that you're trying to think about how you can do better during COVID-19 times. Jo's got some fantastic tips for all of you. So if you've got specific issues, pop them in the chat box and Jo will come back to you with responses on how to overcome those issues. Same applies to Digital Dave, who Dave will be talking about technical challenges, whether it's about theory, whether it's about specific pieces of equipment, whether it's about understanding what kind of equipment might be suitable for your lab or your teaching outcomes that you have on your syllabus in the next year or so. This is the place to post those questions live. Right, so let's get on with some questions now. First, Jo, I'd like to talk to you quickly. Now, it's a really, really confusing time at the moment with COVID-19, whether you're coping well or not. Everybody has their up days and their down days. What would your top tips be for staying positive? Because some people are getting really down in the moment right now.
Absolutely. It's hard to stay positive when there are so many uncertainties, isn't it? It's really difficult, and we can find ourselves plagued with sort of negative thoughts, catastrophic thoughts, worries about the future, you know, making predictions, negative predictions about the future. You know, am I going to keep my job? Am I going to get ill? Is someone else going to get ill? Those sorts of things. There's lots of uncertainty. And it's easy, isn't it, in those situations to start to feel anxious and to have these kind of negative thoughts. So it's important to notice when we have them, these negative thoughts, and to try to, you know, think through them and rationalize them a bit. You know, is this thought really based in evidence? Is it a rational thought? Is it helping me to stay strong, or is it actually making me more stressed? And, you know, to try to develop some more balanced thoughts. Say to yourself, what might someone else say to me in this situation? You know, if I said to them, I think I'm going to lose my job, what might they say?
I think that's a really good point, because sometimes if there's somebody you really respect, somebody's opinion, you think, oh, they're really level-headed, that's a great way of just making yourself step back, because it's hard to say, well, is this thought rational or not in my own head if you think about being in someone else's head.
Yes, absolutely. And it gives you that perspective, and that's what we're aiming for when we have negative thoughts. We want to get kind of perspective on it. We want to be able to stand back from it. Actually, writing down your thoughts can be really helpful in that sense too, because it gives us that perspective. Asking ourselves, how will I feel about this in 5 years' time? Again, it gives us perspective. And when we start to think in a more balanced way, we have less negative emotions and more positive emotions. We might actually feel excited, or we might feel calm, much more calm and relaxed. Sympathetic nervous system starts to be kind of reduced, and we experience much more of a calmness. And actually, we're able to think more clearly about any problems that we are facing. The other thing I would say about staying positive is positive emotions are associated with optimism. So experiencing as many positive emotions as possible is really important. We don't really think about positive emotions very often. You know, things like love and gratitude, interest, excitement, pride. You know, these are all positive emotions that we're experiencing, you know, probably every day, but we don't really notice them because they sort of pass us by. They're a bit unremarkable. Negative emotions grab our attention much more because they're a sign that there might be a threat around. Positive emotions, they kind of come in, they make us feel nice when they happen, but then they disappear again. So we want to optimize our opportunities to experience positive emotions, because actually positive emotions, like I said, increase our potential to feel optimistic about the future and to put things into perspective. So you might want to just notice when you're experiencing positive emotions a bit more, you know, really maybe even use a diary. Write down each day which positive emotions you've experienced and what sorts of things have triggered those emotions. You could do some exercises like writing down 3 good things each day, because what this does, you know, get 3 good things that have happened, because what this does is it kind of shifts our attention, our focus onto the positive. You could write down 3 things that I feel grateful for each day. Gratitude is another positive emotion. And when, like I say, when we experience positive emotions, it makes us more optimistic, but also positive emotions have a kind of undue effect on things like stress.
Okay.
So imagine you've probably been in this situation, you've had a really stressful day at work and you're really wrung out, and you get in the car. This was back in the day when we were going into work. You get in the car and you switch the radio on, and a song comes on that you really like, that's really uplifting. And suddenly you feel happy, and maybe you're singing along, you know, you get a lot of positive emotions, and suddenly that stress that you were experiencing has gone out the window. So that's a good example of how positive emotions can really just undo negative emotions and stress emotions. So absolutely, staying connected with other people is another way of remaining positive. I think we might talk a little bit more about that shortly, and thinking about how to cope with isolation. But we experience a high number of positive emotions when we're connecting with others. You know, things like love, amusement we're often experiencing with other people, gratitude, kindness, you know, those sorts of things we're experiencing with others. So yeah, absolutely. Staying connected as best you can in these circumstances is really important in order to keep us positive.
Great. Thank you, Jo. That's really, really helpful. Right, Dave. Dave, are you on the line still? I hope you've not gone off to the kitchen to make some biscuits.
Banana bread.
Dave, you need to come back. Come back to us. Join us once more. Dave is having some slight technical difficulties with Zoom today. So hopefully he will join us any moment. Maybe see. Are you there, Dave? Nope. Right. Okay. Well, let's. Yes, he's been disconnected. He tells me on my messages. Okay. So that's a little bit annoying as we wait for Dave to reconnect with us, and I try and let him back into the room. In the meantime, Jo, now I think let's talk about staying connected a bit more. It's a bit of a strange one, I think, because sometimes, like I've done FaceTimes with my mum, or I even joined a Zoom mums meeting on, it was the equivalent of going to the pub, but at my desk, which felt really weird because this is where I work. And then to sit here and have a glass of wine and chat with my friends felt a bit disjointed, to be honest. What would you recommend in terms of staying connected and good balance to achieve, and how to do it effectively?
Yes. I can identify with that, Dion, because I've done the same thing. You know, I'm doing a lot of work on Zoom at the moment, and And you know, if I want to use Zoom for social purposes, it does feel a bit weird because it's associated with work for me. So what I tend to do if I'm having a social on Zoom is I do it in a different place in the house. I go to a different part of the house, maybe the living room or whatever. You know, I sit somewhere different, so it feels like a different type of experience. Zoom
yeah, I
really
think that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and these methods of communication that involve actually being able to see one another, like Zoom and FaceTime and that sort of thing, are really important because we need to maintain face-to-face contact. Face-to-face contact is very important in terms of you know, keeping us kind of healthy. It contributes to our well-being. We can, in the context of face-to-face contact, really show empathy, share our feelings, really listen to one another. It's much harder to do that via text or, you know, instant messaging or whatever it is. Much harder to, because lots of things get lost in translation, don't they, when we're typing. Telephone's, I guess, the next best thing after a face-to-face connection. And obviously with social isolation, it's much more difficult to stay in contact with people, but it's really important that we do that. And actually, I would suggest that people build that into their routines, their day-to-day routines, checking in with people, even if it is just a text, you know, checking in with people, connecting with people regularly, because our social contact, our social connections serve a really important purpose in terms of protecting us from developing stress.
Okay.
And the input of other people also is really helpful when we're facing difficulty, because we get other people's perspective, we get other people's life experience, other people's views. So if we're struggling in life, that input from others is really important. So yeah, absolutely. Making sure that you stay in regular contact with others is, by whatever means, is crucial for our well-being. Do we think Dave is back? I
think Dave does seem to think, yes, you're here. Brilliant.
Good.
You returned.
Yeah, I had to leave the meeting 3 times. There's a problem with the bandwidth somewhere between myself, Dion, and cyberspace. So I'm back now.
I think you run to the shop to buy some biscuits.
Have you seen me run, Dion?
Okay. On your bike.
yeah. That's more.
Oh no, that might be a bit dangerous.
I've got a puncture now.
Oh no.
Yeah, so yeah.
Oh, dear. Right. Okay. Thank you, Jo. Jo, I'm just reminding everybody that we're live again on YouTube. This is a live Q&A session with Tech Equipment. My name's Dion Knowles. I'm joined by clinical psychologist Jo Burrell and the one and only Dave Giddings, Digital Dave. Now, Dave has been a bit absent with technical issues. Whether he's been really buying biscuits or not, I don't know. But Dave, it's now time to earn your money. Put your money where your mouth is and stop answering some questions. Dave, I've got a question for you. Worst practices. Now, I know sometimes we get all kinds of questions with customer care. Some people accidentally do some things to equipment, or you'll find students have done something to a piece of equipment and it's actually horrifying and really not good for the longevity of that equipment. What are some of the worst practices that you've seen, and what are the top tips for avoiding those things that you absolutely must not do and should tell your students to definitely not do?
Well, you know, Dion, before we start, every day I have a thought of the day, just one important thought, and today the thought is the word unprecedented.
Okay.
We've heard that word on an unprecedented level, more so in the last few weeks. So the word unprecedented has been used on an unprecedented scale. It's unbelievable. But anyway, okay. Back to the worst practices. Well, you know, we had one last week where we had some customers teasing us with the idea of using salt water in our fluid mechanics equipment, that's a big no-no because of the effects that will have on the operation, the performance and the longevity. So that's a big no-no. Other things I come across with, well, of course, we have to be careful of plugging in the equipment into the right power supply. So when there's a myriad of options, like in America, where we've got 110, 115, 120, 240, hot, phase to neutral, phase to earth, phase to ground, it can be a bit of a minefield. So just be aware before you go rushing into plugging in your equipment, just to make sure that you're plugging into the correct power supply as well. So we've got the salt water thing, we've got the power supply thing. They're the probably some of the most frequently asked questions or calls for help within customer care. Okay.
Now, increasingly, people are making their own models to go in tech equipment apparatus, whether it's to go in a wind tunnel, whether it's to go onto the modular fluid power bench. Are there some things that we really need to keep in mind for those? Because I could imagine there might be potential for problems there. Are there, or am I just reading into things?
Well, let's just choose one piece of equipment where that happens quite a lot, and I get asked quite a lot in my capacity. If we've got a subsonic wind tunnel, AF 1300, quite often, more than often, I get asked, can I fit my own models to the wind tunnel? Well, the answer is yes, but there are considerations that need to be taken into account. For example, the physical size of the model, be it an airfoil, a wing, a car wing mirror, it has to physically fit into the working section, okay? And equally, its stem or support shaft has to be a certain diameter so it can be clamped into our 2-component or 3-component balance. So going from memory, I think that's about an 11mm stem. So providing your model fits and it has the right stem, then it can be fitted into our wind tunnel. But also be mindful of what material they are considering to use. So if they're going to make an airfoil out of balsa wood, then it could last about 30 seconds in the wind tunnel. Because of the 85 miles an hour wind speed, it could it could be a catastrophic investigation. Okay. So they're the main thoughts I offer to customers when they get excited, and so they should. They've got a new toy, and they might want to get into a little bit of research on the wind tunnel. So they just need to take a step back and ask the experts, ask us at Tech Equipment in customer care, can we do this? Because more and more now we're seeing 3D printers in use in universities. Yeah. I mean, in the States, in America, it's a hot topic. All of our distributors in the States, all our sub-agents, they all represent companies also that market, that manufacture 3D printers. So I see lots of models in wind tunnels that are being generated by a 3D printer, but there's a fine balance between, excuse the pun, between being able to fit the model, but also it being manufactured in a material strong enough to resist the impact of that high-speed wind.
Right. Okay. And now, if we're thinking about 3D printed materials, are there certain materials that are absolutely no, or is it?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know
enough
about 3D printers to make myself look an even bigger fool on YouTube Live.
So you see, these really are live questions, everybody. We don't prepare Dave in advance. Yeah. We put everybody on the spot because it's live, and that's how we want it to be.
You tried to put me on the spot last week about Mach numbers.
Oh, yeah. Now, what weren't you able to answer on Mach numbers? Have you gone away and done your homework? Perhaps you could just remind us what is a Mach number now.
No, I didn't have to.
Joe has got glazed eyes here thinking, what the heck are we talking about?
Well, the Mach number is named after an Austrian physicist and philosopher, Ernst Mach. Okay, so just to get an idea what a Mach number is, it's quite a simple explanation. A Mach number is the ratio.
Oh, is the ratio? He's frozen there for me, but maybe
Yes,
that's
for me
just me.
too. Yeah,
He has you. Okay,
yeah.
that's really ironic.
Friends, hasn't he?
The facial expression. Dave is about to tell us what a Mach number is. Well, I'm going to just fill in the short term. It's an aeronautical term. It is talking about wind speeds, but Dave will tell us all about the Mach numbers, whether it's Mach 1.2, in a few minutes, while Dave resolves his Mach challenges and technical challenges. Jo, maybe it's because he's had a lack of sleep. Loads of people are struggling with sleep at the moment. Now, you have lots of tips, I know, on how to do sleep, and I know, having had younger children in the more recent times, and even children that are not quite so young now, we do try to follow bedtime routines, but we still do fail, and people are waking up in the night annoyingly and making me tired too. What tips, I mean, generally for everybody involved, for getting what's causing sleep disruption at the moment? I know we might not be as stimulated, but what else can we be doing? Help.
Yes. So often, disrupted sleep, difficulty getting off to sleep, waking in the night, waking regularly, having trouble getting back to sleep. These are all like the early warning signs that we're anxious, stressed, troubled, got things on our minds. Sometimes they're the first sign that there's something going on, psychologically. We might actually feel okay in the day, but notice that our sleep is not what it should be.
Right.
And then we can get into a sort of pattern, can't we, of disrupted sleep. It can be difficult to get off to sleep. Maybe we wake in the night. We worry a lot about the fact that we're not getting enough sleep, that we're not going to be able to function properly the next day. And then when we get back, try to go to sleep the following night, we're worrying again. And that gets us into a cycle which impacts on our sleep. So there's a couple of sort of sets of advice that I'd give. It's really good for us to get into a sleep routine, as you mentioned. We do tend to do this with children. We try to, get children into a routine. We have a bath, a story, then bed maybe. And actually, as adults, we should be doing the same thing. We don't necessarily need to get our husbands to read us a story, but, we could use a podcast, which I'll be talking about in a minute. But yeah, it's good to have a kind of routine, a regular bedtime, a pattern that we go through each night as we which prepares us for sleep. It prepares us mentally and physically for sleep. Get off the screens a good hour before you go to bed, because as everyone knows, the light that's emitted by screens tricks your brain into thinking it's daytime and tricks your brain into being alert. So we want to get rid of that. Get rid of that an hour before sleep. Try not to eat big heavy meals or drink lots of alcohol before sleep, because of course we can feel like alcohol helps us to get off to sleep, but actually as it's processed in the body, it starts to disrupt our sleep later in the night. So then we can wake feeling tired. Things like a hot bath before bed is really good, because it raises your temperature, and as your temperature starts to come back down again, you start to feel more relaxed and tired. Reading, doing something distracting before you get off to sleep, because that takes your brain away from things that you might be worried about. So reading a proper book rather than a screen, because obviously we've already heard about screens. Maybe listening to podcasts or book at bedtime or audio books is also really helpful. So that's getting off to sleep. Just to say something about what happens when we wake in the night, we can start to get worried as when we wake in the night and we're struggling to get back to sleep, start to have, get ourselves het up and start to fret about how much work we're going to get done the next day, and are we going to function, and am I going to feel tired, and those sorts of things. All of that starts to make us feel more alert because we're feeling anxious. And that's the opposite of what we need in order to be able to get off to sleep. So I would advise, don't look at the clock, because looking at the clock just feeds those worries. If you've been awake for more than 20 minutes, get up, read something, have a hot milky drink, do a crossword, something along those lines, And
what about baking in the middle of the night? That's something that I find my dad always does. I'd speak to him, he'd be like, I made 2 pies last night. And I'm not sure whether that's quite winding down.
It is a bit stimulating, isn't it? Probably. I mean, if it works for you, you know, and it's a short thing, it's not, you know, it's not too long. Maybe it works for you and that's fine. But if you're making 2 pies, you're up for a couple of hours, aren't you? Yes. That's probably longer than we want you to be staying up, really. You know, if you, like I said, if you're awake for 20 minutes, get up, but you know, get up for another 20 minutes and then try getting yourself back to bed. If it's longer, I would suggest having a hot bath, actually.
Right.
Because
Okay.
like I said, that then, you know, it raises your temperature, but as your temperature comes back down again, you're likely to start to feel, you know, tired again. You're just on our website at the moment, and on the blog page, you'll see there are some blogs about sleep, a couple of blogs that we put out in the last few days. There. One about managing how to get yourself off to sleep, and one about what to do when you wake in the night. So yeah, there's more information in those. Things like mindfulness and relaxation exercises are also really helpful to do, just to kind of calm you in preparation for sleep, but also if you wake in the night.
Okay, what's your opinion on, okay, you've had a really bad night. Do you say, I'm going to stay in bed and sleep more and get myself in a better place? Or do you say, I'm going to get up and sort this out and get myself back on routine? This is often the dichotomy that I have with my children, actually, when they've not slept. I think, right, you're getting up at 7 o'clock anyway, so you go to bed early, but it doesn't necessarily work. But I'm not sure whether that's like a good practice to be doing anyway as individuals, whether we should just get a little bit more sleep and then we're in a better mood.
I think often it is, but I think it depends on whether we've got ourselves into a pattern or not. Because if we're in a pattern of not sleeping very well and then starting to sleep in later, then obviously that shifts our whole routine. And at the moment, maybe we can sleep in later because your kids don't have to go into school, or maybe we don't have to get ourselves ready for work as early, or maybe we're not working at all. And so we can, you know, sleep in a bit. But if we start to go to bed later, wake up later, you know, etc., those of us who've got teenagers or have had teenagers will know that they get quickly into the sort of nocturnal way of doing things, where they're up half the night and then they're sleeping through the day. So we don't want that. I think it's okay as a sort of one-off if you've had a one particular bad night, but as a regular thing, I would say if you're struggling with sleep, you know, on a nightly basis, I would say try and get yourself up in the morning. You can have a little nap in the day.
I'm back.
But again, hi Dave, but not longer than 20 minutes. Because if you sleep too long, then of course you're going to struggle to get back to sleep again in the evening.
Yeah. Okay. That's really, really helpful. I've noticed that everybody's on a later clock now. So everybody gets up later, everybody goes to bed later. And I was, the first couple of weeks of lockdown, it infuriated me because I was trying to get up still at 6:15, but the kids were still going to bed later and I was just getting exhausted. Yes. But now I've resigned myself to this new later pattern. Everybody stays in bed till, you know, and I don't get up till probably an hour or so later. And it's a lot more sustainable. I've covered.
Yes. And you know, that shows how we're all having to adapt, doesn't it? We're all making, you know, some big changes, but some smaller changes to adapt to this new way of living. And because we're working at home, maybe we can get up a bit later, and that's okay. It doesn't disrupt anything, you know, so it's fine.
But you won't get a Zoom call from me at 8:30 in the morning though, because I might still be in my pajamas. Dave, how's your sleep going?
We're going to have to shift back again though, aren't we, at some point? So, you know, that's going to be another transition period that we'll have to go through. Sorry, yeah, you were asking Dave about how...
Yeah, my sleep pattern's fantastic, Dion. No complaints, yeah.
Sleeping like a baby through the night, 12 hours.
Yeah, but no, I don't know what happened to this connection. It just disappeared and I went to 4G and equally I couldn't get back in. So I think it's just something external.
Fair enough. You're back.
I'm back anyway. Yeah.
And Jo's relieved because she can have a break now.
So I was talking about Mach numbers. Now, I don't know how much you heard, or should I just run through that again, Dion?
You go for it again, because you'd only just begun it, and it was so funny because you were about to explain and then it froze with your face about to say something.
Yeah.
And,
I was saying that, yeah, well, I'll just run through it again. So the Mach number, it's named after an Austrian physicist and philosopher, Ernst Mach, okay? And we know that the speed of sound is 761 miles per hour, okay? So a Mach number is the ratio of the object speed, be it a plane or whatever, against the speed of sound. So example, if a plane is flying at 761 miles per hour, and we know the speed of sound is 761, then the speed of the object divided by the speed of sound equals 1. So that equals Mach 1, okay?
Okay.
And equally, on our wind tunnels, we talk about different Mach numbers, etc. The difference is, if a Mach number is less than 1, that means the object is flying less than the speed of sound, and therefore it's known as subsonic because it's less than 1. If a Mach number equals the speed of the object, then that means it's transonic. Okay, I hope this is all sinking in. If a Mach number is greater than 1, then the speed of the object is higher than the speed of sound, therefore it's supersonic. And finally, if the Mach number is much, much greater than 1, that means the object is much higher than speed of sound, then that's known as hypersonic. So that's the difference in the definitions of Mach numbers, which you will see in our experimental guides.
But we're never talking about hypersonic, are we? Not in our teaching equipment. No. And transonic is not something we touch either, is it?
No. Subsonic and supersonic are keywords that you'll find plastered all over our websites and in our user guides.
Right. And we've got, I mean, I've pulled up here a couple of supersonic wind tunnels because that's where we talk a lot about Mach numbers, with it going up to Mach 1.8, but it does go a little bit higher there, doesn't it? That's officially.
Can do sometimes, but we don't make any warranty against that, because if the conditions are so perfect where there is no humidity in the air, or it's in a very controlled environment with AC and dehumidifiers, then we can sometimes get to Mach 1.9, and I've seen it happen. That's a bonus, but we make no guarantees on that.
Okay, so it's really humidity affects it massively. Right.
For sure. I've seen this in action. I've seen working sections on our wind tunnels actually have ice formed on them, even though the environment you're in might be 35, 38 degrees Celsius. You know, it's hot, it's sweaty, but that humidity actually freezes when it's compressed and projected through the wind tunnel, through the working section. We see ice forming on the windows and on the two-dimensional models that fit in the wind tunnel.
Wow.
It's pretty interesting to see, actually.
Yeah. Does it form pretty quickly, or does it build up over? Okay.
Very quickly. At one time, I actually touched the top of the working section where the liner is, and my fingers actually stuck to the working section, and it was, you have to be a bit careful because it was so cold. It was so cold. I had to peel my fingers off.
Oh, wow. Okay. Were you, what kind of temperatures were you in terms of room temperatures for that?
That was hot. That was about 40 degrees Celsius in Bangladesh.
And that was the humidity that was causing that, I guess.
Wow. Yeah. Plays a huge part.
Okay. Wow, interesting. Thank you, Dave. Dave, now another question for you. Bad practices. We've all got bad practices in our lives. I'm talking about bad practices in using tech equipment products and maybe maintaining stuff. What are the kind of number one bad practices not to do when you're using the equipment?
being tempted to use salt water in our fluid mechanics range is a big no-no. That's going to have a bad effect on.
I guess Coca-Cola is not going to be good either, is it? I'm joking.
Not too good. No, not too good. Or Pepsi even.
Oh yes, we're brand neutral.
Salt waters. It's just bad news. Okay, it's just bad news. And using the wrong fluid in a manometer, in a piezometer, is also going to cause problems if they're tempted to use a spirit in a water manometer, or if they're tempted to go back to using mercury in manometers. This can have a very disastrous effect on seals and rubbers and gaskets. So we often get questioned about that. And then we can move on to the engines. We've all done it at some point in our lives. We put the wrong fuel in our car. So, you know, if you've been running a diesel car for 10 years, suddenly you get given a gasoline or a petrol engine. It's very dangerous.
It's expensive, Dave. I did it myself a few years ago.
Nowadays, more modern cars have interlocked nozzles where I think it's harder to make that mistake.
It is harder, but if you're going, I think, from diesel to petrol or one way around to the other, it's possible. Yeah. And I know from experience. Anyway, they carry on.
Yeah, but it can get squeaky brakes as well, Dion.
Yes, absolutely. You just change the car when you get squeaky brakes, Dave.
Yeah, Dion's the sort of person who chops a car in because he gets a squeaky brake.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't be bothered with any of that. Anyway, carry on with your engines, Dave, and your fuel.
Well, just using the wrong fuel in an engine can be very problematic. You have to flush the whole system, drain the fuel pipes, etc. So don't make that mistake. We can talk you through it if you do make that mistake and how to rectify it. It can be fixed.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, you will soon know, won't you, once you put the wrong fuel in and it starts to run. Yeah,
you certainly will.
Yeah, it's not happy. All right, good. I'll give you a biscuit break, Dave. Back to Jo. Jo, really quickly on anxiety now. People's anxieties might fluctuate. Really quick top tips for dealing with anxiety during these COVID-19 times.
What quick top tips? So noticing negative thoughts really contribute to anxiety. Trying to question them and ask yourself, are they helpful to me? Are they a bit irrational? Mm-hmm. Am I catastrophizing? Any question that you ask yourself, any negative thought that you ask yourself that starts with what if, is a sign of a catastrophic thought. What if this plane crashes? What if I lose my job? What if I fail my course? These sorts of thoughts are catastrophic thoughts, and often they're not actually based in evidence or reality. The probability of them happening is very small usually. So just asking yourself, is this a rational thought? Is it a reasonable thought to be having? Maybe ask yourself, what would someone else say in this situation? Because then you start to get a bit of a perspective on the thought. Using techniques when you start to feel anxious. So we get physiological symptoms of anxiety, don't we, when we're anxious? We get a heart racing, maybe a bit sweaty, churning stomach, shortness of breath. Using a breathing technique. There's a breathing technique called slow rhythmic breathing, which is really, really useful for managing anxiety. And we have a link to that in one of our blogs. I'm trying to think which one it is, but it's in there anyway, to that technique. So slow rhythmic breathing is definitely useful. And also any sort of mindfulness practice is really useful. So just using techniques that kind of address the physiological symptoms of stress, but also address the thoughts. It's really important to be able to just, manage those thoughts. I'm just looking to see which one it might be. Using balance. I can't remember, but it's in there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. That's really, really helpful. Okay, Dave. Finish your biscuit. I've got another question for you. Now, Dave has travelled the world with tech equipment for the last 10 years. He's gone from continent to continent. He'll be visiting multiple countries in one trip, installing equipment, training on equipment, helping our sales partners. So Dave really does have a vast amount of experience. He's seen some things in his time as well. And I've heard some quite comical stories, difficult, challenging stories as well, where installations have not quite gone according to plan. Sometimes it might be something to do with the building. Dave, are you there? While I'm waiting for Dave to join, I'll explain one scenario which my colleague mentioned to me a couple of years ago. I think he'd been out in the United States of America, and there was a piece of equipment and it was specified as the size, and they'd carried it up multiple flights of stairs ready to put it into this lab, but the doors were too narrow. It was a new facility. The doors had just been built too narrow. So they then had to take them down the stairs, and they pondered how on earth would they get it into the building. The only way to get it into the lab up on 2 or 3 stories up was to take the window out. Thankfully, the lab had huge windows, was to remove the window and then get a crane and crane it up to that 2nd, 3rd level and put it into the lab that way. And they did it. They had also, there was a challenge of getting somebody, a crane driver who was willing to do that, do something that was a bit non-conventional. So that was an interesting story. We had some really funny pictures. I mean, I shouldn't trivialize it because it was a real challenge. It was a bit of a nightmare at the time, but there is always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. Dave's will is not proving to be strong enough to get over his technical challenges, though. Because
just to say, Dion, I had a similar experience with a sofa.
Yes.
Talking about trying to get a large piece of equipment into a building, I couldn't get a sofa into my house, and we had to take a window of the living room out in order to get the sofa into the house.
You actually, was it? Oh, wow. That was really determined that you took the window out.
So when I decide I want a different sofa, I don't know quite what I'm going to do, because I'm going to have to take the window out again in order to get rid of it. So,
or it's going to have to be in such a state that you chop it up in the living room to
yeah.
take it out. Oh my gosh, I haven't heard of that one. I have heard of people chopping it in half to be able to get it into a room and then reattaching it somehow. But
how would you do that? You need Dave's technical skills, I think, in order to work out how to do that.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how comfy it would be afterwards.
No.
I want to do a quick shout out though, because one of our sales partners, Hendrianto, has joined us today, and I was messaging him this morning, encouraging him to be part of this. So it's great to see him, and we've got plenty of other people watching online. As a reminder, do put your questions in the chat box, and we can put them to Jo. I'd like to say we could also put them to Dave, but Dave seems to have not succeeded, frankly.
Left the building.
Yes. Dave's will is no longer strong enough to be with us anymore. But Dave will be back next week. And we will have another guest with us next week live on YouTube. We'll be talking more technical challenges. We'll be talking about different careers in engineering. Jo, I want to thank you again. You've returned for the 2nd time.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's been brilliant to have you with us again, giving some fantastic tips. Every time I listen to you and we chat, I take something fresh away to help deal with either myself, or deal with my kids, or deal with my partner, or advise my friends.
Good.
Yes, I really do appreciate it, and I hope other people have benefited from it in the same way. Dave, in absence of you, I'd like to say thanks for your efforts. I'm sorry you've not been able to try hard enough. Try harder next time, please. And Dave will join us again. I think that's it for us today. Thank you, Jo. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody who's been with us today. We'll see you again next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.